A golden retriever walks into a courtroom and turns a fraud trial upside down. When Murphy, Pam Bondi's dog, unexpectedly heads to the witness stand, it triggers a shocking confession from the prosecution's star witness. Was it a lucky coincidence, or does this dog have a hidden talent for sniffing out lies? You won't believe what happens next. Watch till the end to see how this unbelievable moment changes everything. Chapter 1. The Dog Who Changed Everything. Pam Bondi sat at the defense table, staring at Malcolm Barrens, the prosecution's star witness. The man was twitching in his seat, shifting nervously, wiping sweat from his brow like it was going out of style. But Pam wasn't buying his story. His testimony didn't add up. The dates were off. The meetings he swore happened never took place. It was all starting to unravel and she knew it. Her eyes darted to her partner in this whole crazy mess. Murphy, her golden retriever. He was lying quietly at her feet, looking almost too calm for a courtroom full of tension. She had noticed something strange over the last few days. Murphy was reacting to Barrens in ways she didn't quite understand. Subtle things, a shift in his posture, a glance in Barrens' direction that seemed more intent than usual. It was like the dog knew something was off. Barrens was going on and on about financial records, payments, meetings that never happened. His voice had this shaky quality now, as if he was trying to convince himself just as much as the jury. But Pam couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Then it happened. Murphy, as if on cue, stood up. Pam barely moved, but her heart skipped a beat. Murphy didn't bark or make a sound, he just walked. Slowly, deliberately, like he knew exactly what he was doing. The room froze as the dog made his way toward the witness stand, his tail swishing back and forth in the still air. Everyone was staring, but nobody knew what was going on. Not yet. Pam's pulse raced. She didn't even give Murphy a command. It was just a look, a quiet nudge of energy between them. She had seen this before. Every time Murphy had reacted to someone lying in the past, it was always subtle. It was almost like he could sense the truth buried beneath the surface. As Murphy reached the witness stand, Barrens went rigid. His eyes widened. He couldn't take his eyes off the dog, and Pam could see his nerves escalating. Something was shifting in him, something Pam couldn't explain. She watched, her breath held tight in her chest. Murphy sat down right in front of Barrens, his gaze locked on the man, calm but intense. And just like that, everything changed. Barrens stumbled over his words, his voice cracking. I lied, he muttered, his gaze shifting away from the dog and to the floor. I falsified part of my testimony. The timeline. I changed it. I was pressured. I was trying to cover up. The courtroom went dead silent. Pam didn't flinch, but she could feel her heart pounding. This wasn't just coincidence. There was something about Murphy, something nobody could explain, that had just turned the tide of this entire trial. Barrens was confessing under the pressure of a golden retriever's stare. The judge looked like he'd just seen a ghost. The jury was frozen, eyes wide, trying to process what had just happened. Pam didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just kept her focus. But the truth was out now. What had Murphy done? Was it a trick? Or did the dog really sense Barrens' guilt? The questions began to pile up faster than anyone could answer them. But one thing was certain, things were never going to be the same. Pam glanced down at Murphy, his head tilted slightly, as if he knew exactly what had just gone down. She couldn't explain it, not yet. But whatever it was, Murphy had just changed everything. Chapter 2. The pressure that broke him. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Pam Bondi couldn't take her eyes off Malcolm Barrens. He was sitting there, looking like a man who'd just seen a ghost. And in a way he had. Murphy, her golden retriever, had done the unthinkable. He'd gotten under Barrens' skin in a way no one could explain. The room was still processing what had just happened, but Pam knew something bigger was at play. Barrens' confession hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. The judge didn't know what to do. The jury was frozen. Pam stayed calm, her face a mask of professional composure, but inside her mind was racing. She'd been waiting for this moment, this crack in Barrens' story, but she never imagined it would come from a dog. Murphy sat there like a little furry angel of justice, his tail slowly swishing as if nothing had happened. But for Barrens it was a different story. His face was pale, his eyes darting nervously. He shifted in his chair, rubbing his hands together like they were on fire. Something was breaking in him. I didn't mean for it to go this far," Barrens muttered, barely audible. His voice cracked under the pressure, and his eyes flicked toward Murphy, who was still sitting patiently in front of the stand. "I was just trying to protect myself. I was scared. They made me do it." The air felt thick. Pam could practically taste the panic coming off him. She'd known for days that Barrens was hiding something, but she never thought he'd crack so fast. What had made him do it? Was it the dog? Or had he finally reached the tipping point? The judge cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Barrens," he said slowly, "you're under oath. What exactly are you saying?" Barrens gulped, his eyes darting around the room. "Elite. I altered the timeline," he admitted, his hands trembling. "I was told to change the story to protect other people involved. I didn't want to, but I had no choice." His voice wavered as the truth spilled out. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to do it. I was pressured into it." Pam's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the confession she'd been hoping for, one that could change everything for her client. But she didn't feel victorious. She felt more like she just uncovered a deep, dirty secret that was only the tip of the iceberg. The room was buzzing now. The jury, the judge, even the prosecutor looked like they'd been hit by a freight train. Pam stayed silent, watching Barrens squirm under the weight of his own lies. It wasn't just the dog. It wasn't just Murphy. It was something about the pressure, the intense, suffocating pressure that had broken Barrens. The confession came not because of Pam's brilliant legal strategy or some game-changing piece of evidence, but because of a damn dog staring him down. Murphy had done what Pam couldn't. He had broken Barrens' composure in a way no one could have predicted. The truth had spilled out, and now everyone was left to pick up the pieces. As the room remained in stunned silence, Pam couldn't help but think about what had just happened. She hadn't planned for this. Nobody had. But now there was no going back. Barrens had confessed. And with that, everything had changed. Pam's gaze flicked down to Murphy. The dog was sitting there, looking completely unfazed, like he'd just done his job. But Pam knew this was no coincidence. The way Barrens had cracked, the way he'd admitted everything, Murphy had played a bigger role than anyone realized. And now, Pam had a whole new set of questions to answer. Chapter 3. Did Murphy just sniff out a liar? The courtroom was in chaos. Barrens had just admitted to lying under oath, and the ripple effect was felt in every corner of the room. Pam Bondi leaned against the defense table, staring down at her golden retriever, Murphy, who was quietly wagging his tail. She couldn't believe what had just unfolded. No one could. Barrens, now sweating bullets, had cracked like an egg. But was it the dog that did it? Pam wasn't so sure. Could a dog really detect a lie? Murphy had never been trained for that. He was just Murphy, the calm presence that always stayed by her side in the courtroom. Yet today something had clicked. Something bigger than either of them could have anticipated. "Pam, did you see that?" One of her colleagues whispered, still in shock. "I mean, the dog just... Did he really make Barrens confess?" Pam didn't answer immediately. She couldn't. She was still trying to make sense of it all. Murphy had been acting strange for the past few days. He was unusually alert when Barrens spoke. His gaze never left him, and every time Barrens lied or wavered, Murphy would tilt his head or move closer, as if sensing something Pam couldn't. She dismissed it at first, just a weird coincidence. But now it was clear Murphy had been onto something long before anyone else. "What do you think happened?" her colleague pressed, breaking her concentration. Pam sighed. "I don't know. I really don't know. But I think we're about to find out." She couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play here. Murphy had no formal training to detect lies, but the way he'd reacted to Barrens was different. No one had expected it. But now that Barrens had confessed, the courtroom was alive with speculation. Was it just a freak coincidence? Or had Murphy really done something special? Was there some hidden talent in the dog that allowed him to pick up on subtle changes in Barrens' behavior? Pam couldn't ignore the way he had sat there, so calm and unflinching, staring down the prosecution's key witness as if he knew the truth all along. As the judge called for a recess, Pam stepped outside, her mind racing. She'd never seen anything like this before. She'd seen dogs react to things in the past, but never like this. Never with such precision. Could he have sensed the lie? Pam muttered to herself, still in disbelief. Back in the courtroom, the chatter was getting louder. The media was already picking up on the story. Could a dog really expose a liar? One reporter asked. Pam knew this was going to blow up. The internet would have a field day with this. But the question kept eating at her. Did Murphy really have some kind of special ability? Or was this just pure dumb luck? Pam's thoughts were interrupted by a tap on her shoulder. It was the prosecutor, his face tight with frustration. "You're gonna have a hard time explaining this one, Ms. Bondi," he said. Pam met his gaze unflinching. "I don't need to explain anything. The truth came out. That's all that matters." But inside, Pam was already thinking ahead. Barrens had cracked, but this wasn't over. If Murphy had actually done something no one could explain, they were about to walk into uncharted territory. And no one, not even Pam, knew where this story was going to end. As she walked back into the courtroom, Pam glanced down at Murphy, who was still sitting there, calm as ever. There was something about the dog that felt like more than just coincidence. Pam was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, Murphy had just done something truly extraordinary. And that could change everything. Chapter 4. The confession that shook the court. The air in the courtroom was thick, buzzing with a low hum of disbelief. Pam Bondi stood by the defense table, her mind racing, trying to wrap her head around what had just gone down. Malcolm Barrens, the prosecution's golden boy, had cracked. And all it took was a dog staring him down. Barrens had confessed. The words had spilled from his mouth like water from a broken dam, uncontrollably. And Pam had just stood there letting it happen. She knew the confession was huge, but it was also unsettling. Barrens wasn't just admitting to a small slip-up. He'd confessed to changing the entire timeline of his testimony. That wasn't something you could just sweep under the rug. I couldn't hold it anymore," Barrens had stammered. "I falsified everything. I lid under oath. They told me to change the story to protect others. I thought I could get away with it, but..." His voice had cracked. "I was scared. I didn't want to be the one to bring it all down, but I had no choice. I was pressured." Pam's gut twisted as the words echoed in her head. This wasn't just a small mistake. Barrens had been playing everyone, the jury, the judge, and most of all her client Dominic Renselli. The pieces were falling into place. The truth was ugly, and now everyone knew it. The judge had called for a recess, but Pam stayed glued to the spot, her eyes scanning the room, her thoughts churning. What had just happened? How had Murphy, of all things, become the catalyst for Barrens' breakdown? The more Pam thought about it, the more questions piled up. Could Murphy really sense Barrens' guilt? Or was it something else entirely? In the hallway, the tension was palpable. The prosecutor was fuming, pacing back and forth like a lion in a cage. "You think this is over, Bondi?" he spat, his eyes narrowing. "You think this dog just happened to be at the witness stand when Barrens cracked? You're gonna have a hell of a time explaining this." Pam didn't flinch. "What Barrens said is what matters now. He confessed. The truth came out." The prosecutor gritted his teeth, still not willing to let go of his anger. "You think the judge is just gonna let this slide? You've got a lot of explaining to do. This whole thing's gonna be investigated. We're not done here." Pam didn't bother responding. She knew that look in his eyes, that desperate need to keep the case under control. But it was too late. Barrens had already cracked. There was no turning back now. Back in the courtroom, the energy was shifting. The jury was whispering among themselves, some looking at each other in shock, others trying to process what had just happened. The media was already picking up the story, and Pam could feel the eyes of the world on her. The pressure was on, but she was calm. She'd faced bigger storms before. As she sat back down at the defense table, Pam glanced over at Murphy. The dog was lying there, perfectly at ease, as if he hadn't just turned the trial upside down. It was surreal. He wasn't a trained detective. He wasn't some expert in reading people. He was just a dog. And yet, somehow, he'd known something nobody else had. The questions swirled in Pam's mind. How had it happened? What was it about Barrens that triggered Murphy's reaction? Could the dog really sense lies? Or had this just been a fluke? One thing was for sure. Pam knew this trial was about to take a sharp turn. And it wasn't just about the case anymore. It was about how the world would see Murphy and how they'd see her. This confession was just the beginning, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. As the judge called the room back to order, Pam leaned forward, ready for whatever came next. Barrens had confessed. The lies had been exposed. And now the real battle was just beginning. Chapter 5. The hidden truth behind Murphy's moves. Pam stood outside the courtroom, trying to make sense of what had just gone down. The confession, the drama, it all felt like a blur. But as the chaos settled around her, one thing was crystal clear. Murphy had played a part in all of this. The dog wasn't just a random bystander in this case. He had done something no one could explain. She leaned against the cold brick wall of the courthouse, staring down at Murphy, who was sitting patiently at her side. He didn't seem to understand the gravity of the situation. For him, it was just another day of being by her side, loyal as always. But for Pam, everything had changed. What had happened in that courtroom? What had made Murphy react the way he did? She thought back to the last few days. Murphy hadn't been himself. He'd been more alert than usual, especially when Barrens was on the stand. It was like the dog could sense something Pam couldn't, something about Barrens, something off. 2 days before the trial, Pam had noticed it. As Barrens spoke, Murphy's ears perked up. His eyes never left the man. Pam had dismissed it at first, just a dog being a dog. But the more she thought about it, the more it clicked. Murphy had always been sensitive, always attentive, but this was different. Every time Barrens lied, Murphy had reacted. First with a slight head tilt, then with a subtle shift in his position. It was as if he knew something Pam didn't. Was he onto something? Pam muttered to herself, rubbing her temples. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Murphy than just a well-behaved courtroom companion. She thought about past cases, the ones where Murphy had been present. He'd always been a calming presence, but never like this. Never with such intensity. But this time the dog had known. He had known something wasn't right. And that something had driven Barrens to break. Pam glanced down at Murphy, who looked up at her with innocent eyes. "How did you do it, boy?" she whispered, unsure if she was talking to the dog or herself. "Pam, you good." Her colleague Alex came up behind her, snapping her out of her thoughts. "Yeah, just thinking," Pam replied, shaking her head. "You saw what happened in there, right?" Alex gave a tight smile. "Hard to miss. But the real question is, do you think this is a one-off or was Murphy, I don't know, picking up on something real?" Pam hesitated, glancing at the dog again. "I don't know. But I think we need to find out." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Are you serious? You think Murphy somehow sniffed out Barrens' lies?" Pam nodded slowly. Something about Barrens triggered him. It wasn't just a random walk to the witness stand. "I think Murphy sensed something." Alex didn't look convinced. "You're telling me a dog is smarter than Barrens and his whole team of lawyers?" "Maybe," Pam said, her voice low. "Maybe Murphy saw through the lies Barrens couldn't hide. Maybe he's got something we don't." The thought was absurd, but as Pam looked at Murphy, she realized she couldn't dismiss it. She had to know more. "I've seen dogs react to things before, but nothing like this," Pam continued. "There's something about Barrens that made Murphy snap into action. Something we didn't see, but Murphy did." Alex crossed his arms, skeptical. "You really think the dog's got some kind of detective instinct?" Pam met his gaze. "I don't know. But I'm starting to think that maybe Murphy's not just a dog. Maybe he's got a lot more going on than we realized." As they headed back inside the courthouse, Pam's mind was racing. The case had just taken a wild turn. Murphy had exposed a lie that could change everything, and now she was starting to believe that the dog might have done it all on purpose. The real question was, how did Murphy know? Chapter 6. Murphy's secret weapon. Did he know something we didn't? Pam sat at her desk, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the surface as she replayed the events in her head. The confession. The moment when Barrens finally admitted to falsifying his testimony. It all happened so fast, but now she couldn't stop thinking about it. How had it all come to be? Barrens had cracked under the weight of a dog's stare. She still couldn't quite wrap her head around it. Murphy wasn't trained for this. He wasn't some dog detective that could smell out lies. Or was he? Pam's gut told her there was more going on than she could explain, and the more she thought about it, the more she became convinced that something else was at play. Pam, you okay? Alex's voice cut through her thoughts as he stepped into her office. Pam looked up at him, her eyes tired but sharp. I'm fine. Just trying to figure this out. Alex raised an eyebrow. You've been talking about nothing but Murphy for the last hour. You seriously believe the dog knew something Barrens was hiding? I don't know, Pam admitted, running her hand through her hair. But something about the way Murphy reacted to Barrens, it wasn't just a coincidence. It's like he knew Barrens was lying before any of us did. Okay, so we're talking about a dog that can sniff out lies now? Alex said, half joking, half serious. Next thing you know, he'll be solving murders. Pam smirked, but she wasn't laughing. It's not that simple. But I've been noticing things with him lately. Little things. Alex leaned against the doorframe. Like what? Pam thought back to the past few days. The moments when Murphy had seemed so alert, so focused when Barrens spoke. It wasn't just that he was being a good boy. There was a clear shift in his behavior. He was reacting to Barrens in a way I've never seen before. Every time Barrens said something that didn't add up, Murphy would shift his posture or tilt his head. It was like he was listening for something, paying attention to every word. Alex's eyes widened. So you're saying the dog could tell when Barrens was lying? Pam nodded. I don't know how, but I think he did. He had this uncanny ability to pick up on things I couldn't, things nobody else could. The way Barrens was so nervous, so shaky, it triggered something in Murphy. You think the dog's psychic? Alex asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Pam shook her head, smiling a little. I don't know what to think. But it's not just a fluke. Murphy's been reacting like this for a while, not just with Barrens. I've seen it before. It's like he can sense when something's wrong. He's always been in tune with people's emotions. But this is different. Alex paced around the room, his mind racing. So what do we do now? You gonna train him to be your personal lie detector? Pam paused. Maybe not. But I've got a feeling Murphy's not just a dog anymore. He's something more. Alex looked at her, half amused, half confused. So now we're in a courtroom mystery thriller where the dog is the star? Pam smiled wryly. Maybe. But think about it. If Murphy really can detect lies, he's a game changer. We could use that. But first I need to figure out how he does it. There's something we're missing. And I need to understand what that is. The case had taken an unexpected turn. And now Pam was facing a whole new challenge. She wasn't sure how it worked. But Murphy had exposed Barrens' lies in a way no one had expected. And now Pam needed to figure out if her dog was truly some kind of truth detector, or if she was simply chasing shadows. But one thing was for sure. Whatever Murphy's secret was, it was about to shake up the entire case. And Pam wasn't going to let it slip away. Chapter 7. The courtroom explodes. The truth comes out. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the judge called for a recess. Everyone was still processing what had just happened. Malcolm Barrens had confessed to lying under oath, and the way it had all unfolded, thanks to a golden retriever, had turned this trial upside down. Pam Bondi stood in the middle of the courtroom, staring at Murphy, who was sitting at her feet, perfectly calm. No one else seemed to understand what had just gone down. Was it a trick? Was Murphy trained for this? Or had it all just been one weird, unbelievable coincidence? Pam's mind was spinning, but there was no time for doubts now. Barrens had cracked, and the confession had sent shockwaves through the entire case. Dominic Renselli, her client, was looking at a reduced sentence, but that wasn't the end of it. This was bigger than just one trial. This could change the way people viewed truth, lies, and the power of intuition. As the recess ended and the jury took their seats, Pam glanced at the prosecutor, who was fuming. You're gonna have a hell of a time explaining this one, he muttered as he passed by, his voice dripping with frustration. Pam didn't flinch. It's not about explanations, she replied, her voice steady. It's about the truth coming out. The room fell into an eerie silence as Barrens was called back to the stand. The judge was clearly rattled, his gavel slamming down harder than usual. Mr. Barrens, you're under oath. Please continue with your testimony. Barrens, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour, cleared his throat. I lied, he said again, almost robotically. I altered the timeline. I was scared. I didn't want to be the one to bring everything crashing down. They told me what to say, who to protect, and I just did it. Pam watched Barrens carefully. She didn't trust him, not for a second. His words seemed sincere, but she knew better than to buy into the story. There were still things he wasn't saying. Still things he was hiding. Then the chaos hit. "Wait!" the prosecutor shouted, standing up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. "This is all a lie. You can't just let him walk away with a slap on the wrist. There's more to this. There are bigger fish involved." The room erupted into chaos. The judge slammed his gavel again, but the noise was deafening. The prosecutor was furious, desperate to shift the blame and keep the case under control. But no one was listening anymore. Barrens had confessed, and the weight of his words hung in the air, undeniable. Pam stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. "The truth has already come out. Barrens lied. And now we're going to review everything, every bit of testimony. This case is changing direction, and nothing's going to stop that." She looked at the jury. They were still stunned, trying to process the whirlwind that had just hit them. Pam didn't care about their disbelief. She cared about the truth. And she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her, no matter how messy things got. The prosecutor was still sputtering, trying to regain some control. "You can't just let this go. You think the confession means we're done?" Pam turned to him, her eyes cold and unwavering. "It means we're just getting started." As the courtroom finally settled down, Pam knew one thing for sure. Barrens' confession had cracked this case wide open. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The real work was just beginning, and now Pam had a whole new set of questions to answer. She wasn't going to rest until every last truth was dragged out into the light. And if Murphy was the key to unlocking it all, then so be it. The chaos had only just begun. Chapter 8. The calm after the storm, or is it? The courtroom was still in disarray as the recess dragged on, but Pam Bondi remained composed. She sat at the defense table, her fingers nervously tapping on the surface, watching as the prosecutor stormed around, trying to piece together the wreckage Barrens' confession had left behind. It was clear nothing would be the same. The truth was out, but there were still cracks in the walls, and those cracks were only getting bigger. Pam's client, Dominic Renselli, sat quietly beside her, looking like a man who had just dodged a bullet. His case had taken an unexpected turn, and thanks to Barrens' admission of guilt, things were looking good for him. But Pam couldn't focus on that. Not yet. The dog Murphy had played a role in all this, and now she needed answers. She needed to know if it had all been a fluke, or if Murphy had actually done something no one else could. "Pam," Alex said, his voice low as he leaned in close. "What now? Are we really just walking away with a win?" Pam didn't take her eyes off Barrens, who was sitting in a corner, his face pale. "This isn't over," she replied, her voice tight. "Barrens confessed, yeah. But we still don't know everything. There's a bigger picture here. And I won't stop until we have all the pieces." Her words felt like a promise. But even as she spoke, Pam couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was still lurking somewhere in the shadows. Barrens' confession had shifted the tide, but it was just the beginning. The court's eyes were now on her, and on Murphy. The media had already caught wind of the story. They wanted answers. They wanted to know why a dog had exposed a liar in front of everyone. As the judge called the court back into session, Pam took a deep breath. The judge's gavel slammed down, signaling the start of what would likely be the most scrutinized part of the trial. "You ready for this?" Alex asked, his face full of doubt. Pam turned to him, her gaze steady. "It's not about being ready. It's about getting it done." Barrens was back on the witness stand, looking more fragile than ever. His confession had cracked the foundation of his testimony, but there was more to be said. More he wasn't admitting. And Pam was going to get it. "Mr. Barrens," the judge began, his voice sharp, "is there anything else you'd like to add?" The room went quiet. Barrens fidgeted, his eyes darting between the judge and the defense table. Pam could see the guilt eating him alive. I don't know if I can," he stammered. Pam rose to her feet, her eyes never leaving him. "You've already lied under oath, Mr. Barrens. You've already confessed to falsifying testimony. What else is there to say?" Barrens swallowed hard, his lips trembling. I can't say any more. It's too much. They'll never stop coming after me." Pam stepped forward, her voice cold and steady. "Who, Barrens? Who's coming after you? Who are you protecting? The entire courtroom held its breath. The question hung in the air like a bomb ready to explode. Barrens looked at Pam, his eyes full of fear. He wasn't ready to give it up. Not yet. I can't, he whispered, his voice breaking. Pam held his gaze for a long moment, but she knew it wasn't the time to push him further. Not yet. But when the time came, and it would, she would make sure Barrens spilled everything. As the session ended and the judge called for a short break, Pam stood still for a moment, her mind racing. She had won this round, yes. But the war wasn't over. Barrens was hiding something, and it was only a matter of time before she tore it out of him. She looked down at Murphy, who was sitting quietly by her side, looking up at her with those innocent eyes. What role had he played in all of this? Was it really just a coincidence that Barrens cracked in front of him? Or had Murphy done something more? Pam couldn't answer that yet. But one thing was certain, she was going to find out. And when she did, it would change everything. The dog who exposed the biggest lie in court. In a twist no one saw coming, Pam Bondi's golden retriever, Murphy, became the key to cracking the case wide open. When the prosecution's star witness, Malcolm Barrens, cracked under the pressure of Murphy's stare, the truth came pouring out. But was it just a coincidence? Or had Murphy done something no one could explain? With Barrens' confession, everything changed. But the real story was just beginning. Who was Barrens really protecting? What did Murphy know, and how did he know it? This jaw-dropping turn of events is just the start. Don't miss what happens next. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell to get the latest updates on this unbelievable case and more. You won't believe where this story goes from here.